Leighton Asia project manager goes on leave, sparking calls for measures to prevent him from leaving the territory. Frank Lee Chu's appeal hearing gets underway. And China's July exports accelerate despite US tariff hike.
Well, good evening. The Hong Kong Station scandal has so far caused a management shake-up at the MTR Corporation. Still, the main contractor of the station expansion works, Leighton Asia, has not said a word on the issue. Today, a lawmaker says he's got word that a project manager at Leighton Asia has gone on a month-long leave. Pinky Wong reports.
Hong Kong Station, the place where multiple shoddy works were found. Leighton Asia, the main contractor of the Hong Kong Station extension works as part of the Sha Tin to Central Link project, has remained silent on the issue. The firm's authorized signatory, Raymond David Brewster, who signed off works at the station, is taking 1 month off from July 28th.
It is very dubious and unreasonable for Leighton to grant the leave application to Mr. Brewster in this critical moment. If there is any legal liability in terms of professional liability, the authorized secretary take all the responsibility.
Even the project subcontractor, China Technology Corporation Limited, doesn't agree it's the right time to go on leave.
In this special period of time, especially when the government finds or the government has transmitted the case to police for further investigations in terms of the deviation or the discrepancy between two joints.
Both Lam Chak Ting and Jason Poon have urged law enforcement agencies to prevent Brewster from leaving the city. Just yesterday, the MTR Corporation announced its management shake-up. 4 executives involved in the Sha Tin to Central Link project have left. CEO Lincoln Leung said he's accountable, but will stay on until a replacement is found. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
Besides the issue of accountability, there are also worries about safety at Hong Kong Station. We asked some engineers about the risks involved in the MTRC's plans, which were altered without informing the government. Chief Executive Carrie Lam today slammed the MTRC's altered plans in expanding Hong Kong Station, a move authorities did not approve. A government review found the MTR used 2,000 fewer couplers to connect a platform slab to a diaphragm wall than a previous plan. Instead, long reinforcement bars were fixed to the diaphragm wall before concrete was poured above.
The new design is workable, and if it is developed properly and executed properly, most important to have the supervision report to ensure that what was proposed is actually put into the structure.
While he thinks the design is structurally safe, fellow engineer Ngai Hock Yan has doubts on whether this design may be more prone to cracks. Both professionals think the government should crack open concrete on the top end of the diaphragm walls to check if the number of steel bars used match those on record, and if concrete has been poured properly. Otherwise, the whole wall might have to be rebuilt. In response to the scandalous rail project, the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers said members convicted of dishonest or fraudulent behaviour won't be tolerated and will be kicked out. The statement is signed by top members but not Phil Ko Wong, the group's current president, and the MTRC's projects director who resigned over the incident.
On to other local news now, and the appeal hearing for retired police superintendent Frank Lee Chu got underway at the High Court today. Chu was earlier found guilty of assault occasioning actual bodily harm for attacking a pedestrian during the 2014 Occupy protests. He was sentenced to 3 months in prison. As Caleb Long reports, Caleb Long has more details.
Frank Lee Chu arrived at the High Court this morning as his appeal hearing began. Some people held banners outside the court building to show their support for Chu. The retired police officer was earlier found guilty of assaulting a pedestrian, Osman Chang, with a baton during the Occupy protest in November 2014. A magistrate sentenced him to 3 months in prison but granted him bail pending his appeal. Representing the appellant, senior counsel Charlotte Draycott asked the court to allow the submission of an unedited news video as new evidence. She said the clip depicts a chaotic situation in the area and police officers were trying to drive the crowd back onto the sidewalk. Draycott said the trial judge should have considered the whole dynamics of the situation, which she said led Chu to believe it was necessary to use force. Playing back the video in court, the lawyer said Chang was verbally challenging the police and was an active protester, as he had also joined the Mongkok protest the day before. Draycott said Chang was not an honest and reliable witness. Representing the Department of Justice, senior counsel Daniel Marish said the footage didn't show the crowd charging the police and there were no reasonable grounds for Chu to swing his baton. The judge will decide tomorrow whether to admit the footage into evidence after both sides have completed their submissions. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The United States has announced it will impose 25% tariffs on another $16 billion worth of Chinese goods from August the 23rd, escalating the ongoing Sino-US trade war. Well, Washington's first round of tariffs imposed last month hasn't had much in effect yet, as Beijing's trade surplus hovers near record levels following another strong month of exports. Jeff Tang reports.
Washington is loading its gun to take another shot at Beijing's coffers. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative announced overnight that it will impose 25% tariffs on another $16 billion worth of Chinese goods starting on August 23rd. The final list of goods to be taxed contains 279 of the original 284 products that were on a proposed list announced on June 15th. Beijing has yet to respond to Washington's latest move, but it has previously vowed to retaliate dollar for dollar. The whole point of US President Donald Trump firing the opening shot of the trade war with China last month was to right some wrongs from his perspective. Trump blames China for forcing American companies to hand over intellectual property and technology in exchange for market access, and hopes that slapping tariffs on Chinese goods would help level the playing field. Washington has also long criticized China's massive trade surplus with the United States and has demanded Beijing cut it down, but it doesn't seem to be working. Despite imposing a 25% duty on $34 billion in Chinese goods since July 6th, growth in Chinese exports to the US is stronger than ever. Last month, US-bound shipments from China surged more than 13% from the same period in 2017. It barely shrank Beijing's record $28.97 billion trade surplus in June. The latest figure from July remains as lopsided as ever at $28.09 billion. Some say the hefty tariffs lost their sting because of a weaker yuan, which marked its worst 4-month drop on record between April and July. But many analysts say it's still early days in the trade war and China's export growth could start cooling down in the coming months. There might also be more duties on the way. Washington is reviewing possible 25% tariffs on a further $200 billion in Chinese imports, which could be in place after a public consultation period ends in early September. Meanwhile, Apple could soon become collateral damage in the trade dispute. The tech giant has long benefited from cheap labor and strong supply chain in China, which helped it become the world's first $1 trillion company last month.
Two high-stakes elections have tested US President Donald Trump's clout are too close to call for now. In the state of Ohio, the president took credit for Republican Troy Balderson's performance in the congressional race. This comes despite the fact that the contest could be headed to a recount. Democrats could also celebrate their showing in a district that has gone Republican for decades. And in Kansas's Republican gubernatorial primary, the candidate Trump backed on the eve of the election, Secretary of State Chris Kobach, was neck and neck with the current Republican governor, Jeff Collier. Well,
British Prime Minister Theresa May has told former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson to say sorry for a newspaper column in which he wrote that burqa-wearing women looked like letterboxes and bank robbers. So far, Johnson has refused to apologise.
First of all, I believe, and the government believes, that the question of how a woman should dress is a matter for a woman's individual choice. Nobody should be trying to tell a woman how to dress. As we discuss these issues, and openly discuss these issues, it's imperative that everybody is careful in the language that they use. It's very clear that the language that Boris Johnson used to describe people's appearance has caused offence. It's not language I would have used. I think he was wrong to have used that language.
And still ahead tonight, Colombia's newly inaugurated president vows to make adjustments to a peace deal with the FARC guerrilla group.
And a warm welcome back to TVB News. Former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has pleaded not guilty to 3 new charges of money laundering brought against him. Najib was early charged in court as part of an investigation into missing money at the scandal-hit state investment fund 1MDB. Former Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak was jeered as he walked out of the courthouse in Kuala Lumpur today. Today, Najib pleaded not guilty to 3 new money laundering charges related to the alleged multi-billion-dollar looting of a state investment fund that led to his stunning electoral defeat 3 months ago. Last month, the former leader pleaded not guilty to abuse of power and 3 counts of criminal breach of trust. All the charges against him involve the transfer of millions of dollars into his bank account from SRC International, a former unit of the 1MDB fund that investigators say was looted of billions by Najib and his associates. Najib's lawyers say he is innocent of all charges, including the improper use of a super yacht which has been impounded as part of a hunt for assets linked to 1MDB.
So I want to stress, it's got nothing to do with 1MDB. It's got nothing to do with the issue of the yacht that has just come to Port Klang.
Najib set up 1MDB when he took power in 2009 for the stated purpose of promoting economic development. But the fund amassed billions in debts and has been investigated in the US and other countries for alleged cross-border embezzlement and money laundering. After leaked documents exposed the scandal, Najib sacked critics in his government, muzzled the media and quashed investigations into 1MDB. Public anger led to the defeat of Najib's long-ruling coalition in May's elections and ushered in the first change of power since Malaysia gained independence from Britain in 1957. Turning to Colombia now, in South America, a newly inaugurated President Ivan Duque has vowed to make corrections to a 2016 peace deal with leftist rebels that has divided the country. The 42-year-old lawyer and former senator won the presidential election in June and was sworn into office on Tuesday. He promised to make adjustments to the controversial peace accord with the FARC guerrilla group to ensure victims of the decades-long conflict receive truth, proportional justice and reparations. He also pledged to cut taxes and rekindle economic growth. But a protest march on the streets of Bogota highlighted the difficulties the new president faces. The mass of mostly leftist demonstrators carried banners with images mocking Duque and his mentor, the hardline former leader Álvaro Uribe. They also condemned the murders of activists and civil social leaders. The former FARC rebel group, now a political party, says it is encouraged to see so many people supporting their fight for a Colombia at peace.
Cathay Pacific reported a loss of $263 million for the first half of the year. It was a significant improvement from the $2 billion loss recorded in the first half of last year, the worst interim result in 20 years. Revenue climbed 16% to $53 billion. Overall fuel costs rose, but losses on fuel hedging were sharply lower. Hong Kong's flagship carrier says one of its key challenges remains as cost management, but it still has plans to hire more domestic staff this year.
We talked a lot about restructuring last year in Hong Kong. That process is largely completed. This transformation is also about Cathay Pacific and the group growing. So this year I think we're going to employ somewhere around 1,800 people as we grow and people fly aircraft and work, etc.
A concern group has found the entry record of a Hong Kong man jailed in the Philippines, which the group says would prove his innocence. Tang Long Wai was sentenced by a Philippine court to 40 years in jail for drug possession 18 years ago. The Philippine police testified during the trial that they had monitored Tang for 12 days since June 1st, 2000, but the entry record shows that Tang didn't land in the country until June 19th that year. The concerned group obtained the record through an informal approach, and there are no other records showing Tang's entry into the Philippines in June of 2000. The group says this shows the police gave incorrect statements during the trial.
The number of top scorers for this year's Hong Kong Diploma of Secondary Education examination rose from 9 to 11. The two new top scorers hailed from St. Paul's Coeducational College and Chung Kwan O Government Secondary School. The two successfully appealed their exam results, raising the number of subjects in which they scored the highest grade of 5-star from 6 to 7. Both were admitted to the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Hong Kong. One student, Thomas Wong, made history this year after scoring the highest grade in a record 9 subjects.